Hello, welcome to the channel and thanks for watching. Now currently I'm building up a 3,000 point Nurgle demon army for a tournament in January. Just built a soul grinder, you can see there, built it exactly as it comes, about to do the base. And the next one I'm going to do something really interesting with the base here. So these are toon tanks that I picked up a few years ago on a visit to the tank museum, but you can get them offline. I will try and search them and drop a link here and I can find them. And I want to use that as a ruined vehicle on the base and convert it and scratch build it up to represent a grot tank, so it looks like this demon has been destroying an orc army. Now first of all I started off with the French tank and decided when testing it against the already built one that it would be a bit too tricky to repose the legs of the soul grinder for the sheer height that that French vehicle was going to have. So I flicked through the instructions of the two tanks and looked at it, and the Panzer 38T, which is a World War II German vehicle, looked like it was going to have a lot less height in it. So I thought, right, that's the one to go to for the reposing of the legs of the soul grinder. Now I'm not really going to go through how I repose the legs of the soul grinder. That will be in the soul grinder conversion video that will be a few weeks away. But we'll talk about what I'm doing for the base here. So I got carried away and built too much of the tank before videoing it because I was just enjoying myself. They are very, very quick little vehicles to do. And that's why I think they're fantastic if you want to get them and use them for grot tanks, which I know are in Legends now, but still a great little thing to add onto your army. So what I'm doing here is just taking the component parts of the vehicle and making it look like this in some fashion has been destroyed, whether it be a rocket or close combat, whatever, and scattering them around the base. And what I'm trying to do is pose it and put them on the base there so that the soul grinder can stand over the vehicle. So I'm not trying to put too much stuff at the edges or other than the tank that we put to the side, so that I can then start thinking about where the legs are going to go. So then it all became about posing this, a bit of blue tack into the sockets there as I blue tack the legs together and tried to get it to hold into place over the vehicle. And that's something to consider if you're going to do a scenic base like this is, one, you want the base to look interesting and different, but two, it's got to actually fit with the vehicle you're trying to put over the top and try not to make it too complicated. Now what I did is I put little bits of paint just at the edge of where the soul grinder's feet are going, and that's so that when I do the next stage of the base, I know not to put anything in those positions so that this vehicle will still stand. Now converting this wrecked vehicle into an orky vehicle, what you're looking at here is little moulds made out of blue stuff that I've taken from the Octarius Terrain for Kill team when that was done a couple of years ago. So this has been in the planning for a couple of years, or at least parts of it had. So I've cast up the orky symbols that were all over that terrain using that blue stuff and made little mouldings and castings of it, you can see here. Now if you're interested in making blue stuff moulds, I've got some videos on the channel down there. I'll try and remember to link them down below. So these are little green stuff pieces based off the symbols that were on that terrain. And this is really just a quick way of showing that this is an orky vehicle, this is not a World War II vehicle, stick something on. So the orc face we've got there going onto the side of the turret, now there's some bolts and nuts and things on there just to scrape off, and then we'll stick that orky symbol onto the side of the turret just using a bit of super glue. And really, that's it. That's the start of turning this into an orc vehicle. There's lots of things you can do, and some of which I'm going to do on here. But because it's a ruined vehicle, I'm not going to go overboard in sort of orcifying the vehicle itself. If I was doing this for an actual orc army, which is why I originally bought these vehicles, I fancied starting an orc army. An army I've fancied doing quite a few times recently and never really got around to it. But if I was doing this to actually use as a Gretchen vehicle or a grot tank, I'd probably put some more weapons on. You know, I might replace the weapon sticking out the turret with a las cannon or something. I might put some more weapons on the vehicle. But because this is representing a destroyed grot tank, it's all about what I'm going to do with the base, which you'll see kind of later. Now, we obviously know where the soul grinder is going to be posed and whatever, but it looks a bit clean, the actual vehicle itself. This is meant to be destroyed, so I'm going quite heavy at the clippers, mostly around the neck or the hull area where the turret would slot on for the actual model, chopping it up so it doesn't look like it's got slots and it looks like a real turret would go on there, and then just hacking some random battle damage into places across the vehicle. Now I didn't do too much, you didn't go to town, you could really go heavy and put tons and tons of damage in, but enough to make it look sort of battered and trashed. Then dug out the pin drill and was originally going to drill out the barrel on the machine gun and snapped it, but there's no trouble there, just drilled the hole straight into the tank. Now this is where in reality if you were to drill that out you might then put a bolt gun sticking out the front of it or something like that if you were going to use it as a live working grot tank. Drilling some bullet holes into the side of the vehicle there and using the end of a hobby knife sort of widen those holes out. Now because I'm not using all the accessories that the kit comes with, there's 3 holes already drilled in the side to put on like pouches and packs and things, but they were scaled more to like a World War II figure, so the packs and the guns were a lot smaller than you get in 40k, so I chose not to glue them on and just treat that as bullet impacts from something else. Now it's time to orkify the base. I want this to look like a vehicle that's been destroyed and there's lots of orc kit knocking around and we've wiped out an orc army. So I don't have many orc spares, to be honest, but I do have the spares in my bits box from the Octaria's kill team set, which obviously had a couple of orc units in there. So going through and basically chopping off what's left. So cutting off an orky slugger, I'll call them, I think. Orky slugger there. Chopping the hand roughly down. Not being too neat about the hand because I'm going to cover that up later on. Making it vaguely look like a handle, and we'll cover that later on. So going through now, if you've got tons and tons of orc spares, you could go to town on the base and put lots of different equipment on. Obviously I'm quite minimal. Did have a backpack that was on that kit that I didn't use on the orc kill team for some reason. Maybe there was options on there, I can't remember, that was a couple of years ago. Taking a couple of knives and a couple of parts like that scattered across the base, so this looks like we've had a battle, the orcs have been destroyed. The other thing I'll do to note is the inside the tank there, that's actually a grot head from one that had like a skin diver helmet on. And the one I'm using on the base was just another mask, so it's not actually a head, it's the mask that they'll be wearing. I did cut out the grot nose because obviously that would be flesh that would have sort of rotted away. So yes, that's what you would put on if you had and you were turning this into a grot tank. You'd probably use an actual grot sticking out a turret, that kind of thing, to look like this is a manned working vehicle. Now this is one of my favourite sprues, the skull sprue, chopping off and putting skulls all over the base. On the normal soul grinder you see there, that's a mix of skulls, human, tau, demon, whatever. Onto the orky base you see in here, this is just orc skulls that I use, and you do get 3 or 4 different orc skulls on that skull sprue, and I do use that very frequently. Now if you don't have that and you don't want to take that investment and you don't want to do that, you don't need to, and you could obviously do this with any kind of vehicle, any kind of tank, but this is to me a real cheap way of getting a grot vehicle and building it. Now obviously this is for a base, so actually it's an expensive way of doing a base, but if you were doing this for grot tanks, £10-12 a grot tank, when the actual affordable ones are about 30 or more if you try and get them offline, so definitely time saving. Money saving rather. Now the painting stage, so starting off I've sprayed it black and I've sprayed it with lead belcher. The best colour I think for doing 40k vehicles and things in, because any areas you now miss you're going to have metal showing through it. It'll look like battle damage and rust and things. First stage I'm doing here is a grelin earth. Now what this is a technical paint. This dries and this cracks and this fragments, and then you paint over the top of it and it'll look like cracked and chipped paint when we've done the whole technique. And what this video is about, how I'm going to battle damage up this model to make it look like it's been on the battlefield. Now here's something I've never used at this kind of stage of painting before. This is typhus corrosion, and this is a rust effect that Games Workshop do. Now I've always used this kind of after the painting effect, and I thought it'd be a bit of fun to try it at this stage early on when we start the painting, before we do any washes. I've always used it after wash stages, so a bit of an experiment, but worth kind of trying. And the idea that I'm kind of going for is we've got the grelin earth to make all the cracked paint where it's flaking off, and then all the other areas I'm putting the rust effect, the typhus corrosion, so that the whole thing looks rusty, manky, horrible. Now this is when those first stages have dried. You can't do the next stages before these have thoroughly dried, because this is where we're going to start making the paint look rusty, damaged, battle damaged, that kind of thing. Now I've gone for red because orcs use a lot of red, and obviously I'm painting this up in an orky fashion. And when you see here, I'm very gently going across. I'm not stabbing into the paint, because what I don't want is where all that grelin earth has cracked, I don't want to put paint into the cracks. I want the paint just to be on top of those flakes where they're coming off. So very gentle, side to side, several thin coats where it's needed across the whole model. Now taking some bone white and going into all the skulls that we've put across the base here. Now when I put that basing paste on, I didn't really talk about that earlier, but I've done the base with a basing paste. That's a Vallejo paste, and I just put that across the whole base, up onto the vehicle in parts, into the kind of hull and area. You could do that with just sand and PVA glue, but I really like the basing paste and the effect it gives, so that's what we've chosen to do. Now all the paint's going to be at the top left of the screen, as they always are, but you don't need to follow the exact colour scheme I do. This is just that kind of inspiration part. So working across the base, not using too many colours actually in this scheme. So I'm not wanting this to be a super vibrant base. I'm just wanting this to be representative of the battlefield, because obviously the model is what I want to look really good. And this is really about enhancing the model. So trying to keep the colours relatively muted, but with that pop of colour for that red to sort of be a real vibrant offset to the green that I'm going to be using for the most part with the Nurgle. Now, obviously this is the bit that makes it the grot tank, so the cast up symbol there, just taking quite a vibrant green, make it stand out. We are going to do a wash layer later on, and you can see there, correcting mistake where the green went on the red. If you do make mistakes as you're painting, one of the best things I would always say is try and fix it as you're going. Paint takes a while to dry, Try and fix it as you're going. Now only a tiny bit of Retributor armour, bronze detail or brass detail onto the model, just onto the exhaust vents and a couple of little areas of bullets. So I'm using a lot of the same colours you'll see me use eventually when we paint the soulgrinder. In terms of, we've got the skull colour, we've got the bronze you'll see here. So I'm not going wild and wacky, and some of the colours will transfer across. It's mainly, the main colour difference is going to be this red on the grot vehicle. Speaking of grot vehicles, I've not actually spoken about why I've chosen to do a grot vehicle. I've obviously owned these vehicles for about 3 years now that I picked up from the Tank Museum in Bovington. You can buy them offline. I can't remember if I said that yet already. It's 10 minutes ago. It's a long video. And I was saving them to do a grot army and to do an orc army. It's something I've thought about numerous times, never really got around to. And obviously it's just been Orktober. This video is going to come out just at the after it into November. But the main reason I've chosen to do it is for the tournament I'm doing in January, 3,000 point tournament, just down at Warhammer World we're doing, just between 4 of us, so not, nothing fancy, just a tournament between friends. But one of the guys coming has never come to Warhammer World before, has never joined in one of these kind of trips that we do quite regularly. There's a bunch of us that do these kind of every 12 weeks or so. There's going to be 4 of us down there, and he's bringing orcs. And I thought, what better way to troll the new player than to have a ruined vehicle on the base that's going to represent his army. It's a bit childish, but it's also a bit funny, and also it'll make my model look, I think, kind of cool with something radically different on it. Okay, so you've just seen me there drill out the exhaust. I'd already started painting it, but I drilled it out because I realised, no, I don't want that flat exhaust, and then just touched it up afterwards. You can see in there with the silver. Now this is what it looks like before the wash stage, so hopefully you can see here lots of nice cracks and bumps and manky stuff all across the armour and things. You'll see with the base, I did the base beastie brown, which is the same colour I've done my demon base, but it was a lot darker than normal. So if you saw there, I did a very light dry brush over the top with bone white to just make it slightly lighter, because I was worried that the base was going to be radically different coloured than my demon army, because my demon army, obviously if you've watched those videos so far, you'll know that I've painted that from a white or whitish spray paint layer. So the base I didn't want it to be too bright in terms of compared to this base, so I've dry brush of the bone white across the top to hopefully make it a little bit lighter when we come to paint it. Now, an all over wash you've seen there of sepia shade, and then it's just touching it up. So now first layers have all been done, wash layer to sort of tone it down a little bit, and then I'm using exactly the same paints just to highlight over the top. Now this is not extreme, these are very, very subtle highlights, just to drop some of those initial colours back onto the model there. Going through all the colours we've done already, so we've done the reds, taking the rust effect, the surface corrosion, and just dropping it into a couple of little places where I think it could do with being brought up. Now this is kind of how my paint technique works. It's layers, it's wash, and then using those same paints again for the highlight layer, because the wash tones it down a little. Now this is the first paint that's going to be a little bit different, and this is a Rise of Rust, which is the Games Workshop technical paint, and a very light dry brush onto those rusted areas, and even onto the reds, and on some patches I've not put any rust on, just to make it look really, really battered. And the idea is I want this to look like it's been destroyed potentially years ago, and the demonic possession is kind of taken over, and you get me. Now a 3-layer wash on the inks, you'll see there, that's my technique for doing kind of rusty burnt areas. And then I varnished it. Now normally varnishing it, I never had any problem, but you'll see here a lot of slightly white coloured fading, especially over that over the vent there. It was a very, very cold day. It was a brand new can of Games Workshop Mini Storm Varnish, and this doesn't happen very often, but I got a bit of whiting and ghosting onto the corners there, so probably my fault for using the can wrong. Hopefully it's not a faulty can, because I plan to use this can again. So if this happens again on another model, I'm going to be having a bit of trauma. It does happen every now and then. I think it was my fault, but we'll run with it. I'm not going to repaint the models. It'll be okay, and it just maybe looks like some burning or whatever. So now it's every Nurgle player's friend. Nurgle's rot to drop onto the base in a few places, and again this will what it'll be looking like, the sort of horribleness dropping out of the soulgrinder as it's moving. So you saw the soulgrinder legs that we built up there onto the base of the model, and you can see the final effect. Really quite happy with how the cracked armour's gone and how the rust looks. This really does look like an absolutely battered, horrible, destroyed grot tank. So the video really is about the base I've done for my vehicle. I'm really happy. I think this is going to look great in the army. The actual base itself, the muddy areas and the skulls, match with the rest of my demons. This is going to really be like a focal point of the converted soulgrinder that I'm going to do standing on here. But I think also it's a good guide to showing what you can do with a very cheap model to make a grot tank, make something very different for your orc army, you know, and this is what I bought them for originally, so maybe someday I will get around to using them, or I might just have lots of them ruined on bases of my models to troll the guy who's coming up for the tournament for the first time. So I hope that very long rambly video for me, 15 minutes, that's longer than normal. I hope you did like some of that. I hope you give you inspiration, either for doing some grot vehicles for yourself if you're an orc player, how easy you can do that, or if not, some inspiration for what you can do to your bases, and hopefully you've taken some interest out of the techniques there, as you can see some of the battle damage and things going on. So that's it from me. The soul grinder that is going to be on this base won't be the next video. It's going to be a couple of videos down the line. I think the normal soul grinder is going to be the next video, but keep an eye on the channel if you do want to see this whole thing completed eventually. Check me out on Instagram, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, if you enjoyed that, like, comment, subscribe, and hopefully I will see you back on the channel soon.